This would have been the perfect topic to discuss during October with Halloween all going on. Not sure why it took so long to realize that. But November will still work, right? Right. The Curse of Harrenhal isn't something we hear about in the show, but there is an episode called The Ghost of Harrenhal. Many characters believe this massive ruined castle in the Riverlands is haunted by the ghost of the king that built it. When someone who Arya hated mysteriously dies here, the ghost is given credit, but it was Arya and Jaqen H'ghar that were actually responsible. When overhearing others question the death, Arya thinks to herself, "I'm the ghost in Harrenhal." The show writers leave Season 2 Episode 5 title as just a wink to book readers, since it isn't explicitly explained or even mentioned. But the whole Curse of Harrenhal has much deeper roots in the story's lore than just a ghost. Far too many tragedies have happened here for these primitive characters to believe it was all just a coincidence. Every house that rules over this castle soon goes extinct, and there have been 9 different families in its short 300 years since being constructed, and many individuals who were given charge of Harrenhal. The first was House Hor, a family from the Iron Islands that accomplished conquering 2 kingdoms. Both the Iron Islands along with the Riverlands, giving the head of the house the title of King of the Isles and Rivers. This all happened a couple generations before Aegon Targaryen's conquest of Westeros, so every kingdom still had its own king. When it was time for a cruel and violent man named Harrenhal to rule, he decided his house should have the grandest and most excessively large castle in all of Westeros, and name it after himself. When Arya is captured and brought here in the second book, this is how she describes its location. Harrenhal covered thrice as much ground as Winterfell, and its buildings were so much larger they could scarcely be compared. Its stables housed 1,000 horses, its godswood covered 20 acres. Its kitchens were as large as Winterfell's Great Hall, and its own Great Hall, grandly named the Hall of 100 Hearths, even though it only had 30 in some. Arya had tried to count them twice, but she came up with 33 once and 35 the other time. It was so cavernous that Lord Tywin could have feasted his entire host, though he never did. Walls, doors, halls, steps, everything was built to an inhuman scale that made Arya remember the stories old Nan used to tell of the giants who lived beyond the wall. It took 40 years to complete its construction, and thousands of lives laboring away for the king they would call Harren the Black. Harrenhal is near the shores of the God's Eye, the largest lake in the 7 kingdoms. They picked out the best location to build a castle since the land was fertile and would make them rich. But the cost of constructing and manning this monstrosity took a large toll on the Riverlands. The day the King of the Isles and Rivers moved in, Aegon Targaryen arrived and had his dragon burn the castle. Harren the Black refused to bend the knee to the Targaryens, instead choosing to fight. His bannermen in the Riverlands had no love for the man who treated his people so poorly, and he paid the price. The houses in this region sided with the Targaryens. No one truly knew the extent of a dragon's power. Aegon's bonded beast, Balerion the Dread, was the largest and oldest of the Targaryens' 3 dragons. The dragon flame burned hotter than any flame could, melting away at the thick, strong walls of Harrenhal's largest tower, and reaching Harren, along with his family, where they thought they were safe. Harren's cruel reign would come to an end, and House Hor went extinct. What was left of Harrenhal was given to House Coeres. Some believe the ghosts of Harren and his sons who died here walk these halls at night, and anyone who meets eyes with these spirits will burst into flames. The castle was damaged, but still valuable. Sir Quentyn Coeres, who Aegon awarded these lands and title of Lord, formerly served as a master-at-arms at Dragonstone, a castle on an island the Targaryens lived before their conquest. House Coeres, like the Targaryens, originate from Valyria, but they weren't one of the ruling Dragonlord families who tamed and rode on the backs of dragons. Quentyn would rule for 10 years before dying from a fall off his horse. His incompetent grandson, Gargan Coeres, would succeed him. He would serve a lot longer than his grandfather, but would be brutally killed by an outlaw who claimed to be Harren the Black's grandson. He called himself Harren the Red, and he dragged Gargan from his bed to the castle's godswood. Harren the Red was even more cruel than his alleged grandfather, because he sliced Gargan's genitals off and fed them to a dog while Gargan bled to death. He was this fat and perverted slob during his time in power at Harrenhal, so George Martin really wanted this character to have a fitting end to his backstory. Harren the Red named himself the new Lord of Harrenhal and King of the Rivers in an open rebellion to the Targaryens, but it's not like he and his outlaws stood a chance against the dragons, so he just killed everyone in the castle and ran. He would never really take Harrenhal back to his family, since it wouldn't be long before he would be caught and killed. But like House Hor, House Coeres would go extinct after Gargan's brutal death. This all happened right after Aegon the Conqueror's death, after a long and prosperous rule, but he left behind 2 grown sons to inherit the throne. King Aenys Targaryen, Aegon's eldest son, awarded Harrenhal to Lord Lucas Harroway. The Harroways were nobles that previously ruled over a nearby town. Aenys Targaryen was not the great man his father was, and his younger brother, Maegor Targaryen, would openly defy him by taking 2 wives for himself, which would anger the realm since it was against Westeros customs to have more than 1 wife. Maegor's second wife was Alis Harroway, Lucas's daughter. Maegor only married her because he was having trouble having any children with his first wife. After Aenys' short life came to an end, his younger brother Maegor decided to forcibly take the Iron Throne for himself, even though he wasn't next in the line of succession. He spent his entire rule fighting back his nephew and nieces, who the throne rightfully belonged to, as well as devout followers of the faith who opposed Maegor for his marriages. Alis Harroway would eventually get pregnant, but would have a stillbirth that came out horribly disfigured. Maegor heard that Lucas Harroway had Alis sleep with other fertile men so that the child born would give them a royal in their own family. It was nothing but a rumor that was made up by one of Maegor's other wives, but he decided to kill every member of the Harroway family, even distant relatives with the smallest blood connection, so they too went extinct. Maegor even had the castle guards of Harrenhal killed in his rage. Decisions like these was how he earned the nickname of Maegor the Cruel. Maegor was a man of action and little thought, so he decided it would be a good idea to give Harrenhal to any of his knights that proved to be the strongest in a melee. 23 men fought in the streets of Harroway Town and covered the area with their blood. The winner was a man named Walton Towers. This melee must have been no joke because 2 weeks after his victory, Walton succumbed to his injuries and died. His son, Jordan Towers, inherited Harrenhal. In less than 10 years, he too would die from an illness. Jordan had a son, he named after the king who awarded this seat to his family. But the young Maegor Towers was a sickly child, and House Towers couldn't afford to maintain this massive castle. The largest castle in the realm only had a single cook and 3 men-at-arms. An older Targaryen princess named Rhaena, who was unhappy spending her time in King's Landing after a traumatizing life, decided to live at Harrenhal with the young Maegor Towers and care for his household. Little Lord Maegor Towers died at age 16. And its close friend, Rhaena Targaryen, took over Harrenhal after this family went extinct too. That's 4 families that have come and gone in just over 60 years since Harrenhal's construction, so you can see why the rumors of the castle's curse would spread so far and wide. Rhaena would die here 12 years later, and her younger brother Jaehaerys, who was now king, buried her here. King Jaehaerys would grant Harrenhal next to House Strong, an ancient family from the Riverlands. They would hold it for 58 years, longer than any family before them. But before their extinction, a mysterious fire did kill one of the lords here and his son. This was probably how the belief that the ghost of Harren the Black was spontaneously combusting victims with their eyes came to fruition. The family would survive the fire, however, and their legacy would live on until 131 AC, when they would all be wiped out after the events of the Targaryen Civil War called the Dance of the Dragons. The next person to take over was a nightmare. When the castle was vacant, a woman named Alice Rivers would take Harrenhal for herself, before the Targaryens could grant it to another family. Her backstory is kind of a mystery. We don't know who she truly is, or where she came from, but she does give off some strong Melisandre vibes. It's believed she was a bastard who served under House Strong. During the war, she was able to enamor a prince fighting in the fields named Aemon Targaryen, a terrifying man in his own right. History remembers her as his bedmate, but she claimed to be his wife. We don't know when she was born, but it's stated she was well over 40, but looked very young from bathing in maiden's blood. The whole blood part is probably just a rumor, because like I said, she definitely has some fire priestess magic going on like Melisandre. She would actually see visions and fires, and relay that information to Aemon for advantages in the war. She would get pregnant by the time Aemon died in a badass dragon fight near Harrenhal, and proclaimed the child to be his rightful heir. Outlaws would come to her and serve, calling her their witch queen. Eventually some men came to give her the boot out of the castle, as she had no right to be in. A Kingsguard member who was hurling insults at the Witch Queen allegedly had his head explode from her magic. It could be the same kind of magic Melisandre used to set that eagle on fire. She captured one of the men, sent to kick her out, and made him her messenger. When the messenger went to tell people to stay away from Harrenhal, he said that Alice had cursed him, and if any man laughs at what he has to say, he will immediately die. He told people that he saw a dragon belonging to the Witch Queen within Harrenhal. One man laughed, and the messenger died, with visible hand marks around his neck. It's like Alice used a force choke on him from a distance. The book that covers all the lore about the Targaryens, called Fire and Blood, Doesn't go on to say what happened afterwards to Alice Rivers or her child, but 18 years later, House Targaryen gave Harrenhal to another family, meaning she was dealt with somehow. In 151 AC, it would be House Lothston. Sir Lucas, the first Lord Lothston, got Harrenhal for performing so well as the Targaryens' master-at-arms. The Lothstons would hold Harrenhal for even longer than House Strong. They went extinct somewhere between 220 and 230 AC, when once again another nightmare of a ruler held power here. Lady Danelle Lothston, who kind of has this vampire-like presence to her, was the head of House Lothston at the time, since no living male was left in their line. She would wear tight-fitting black armor, which is very rare in this primitive setting for women to do. At some point in her life, she began to dabble in black arts, with stories of her bathing in blood and having feasts of human flesh. She had the reputation of being insane, with the fitting nickname of Mad Danelle. I guess at some point her antics got out of control and she had to be put down by the Iron Throne. Even in the current storyline, parents tell their misbehaving children that if they keep acting up, giant bats from Harrenhal would take them to Mad Danelle, in hopes it would scare them straight. Funny enough, the next house to take over would have bats on their sigil for all the large bats that made their home in the crumbling unused towers. It would be knights from a family that were in service to House Lothston that would acquire Harrenhal next. House Whent became the 7th family to rule here. They actually played a role in helping bring down Mad Danelle, and this was their reward. By this point, I can't imagine anyone wanting to make this place their home, but they would stay in power for quite a while, close to 70 years. I mean, that's only a few generations, but a lot better than House Horror's measly 1 day. Catelyn Stark's mother was actually a member of House Whent, and they would be the ones responsible for hosting the greatest tourney in this story, the tourney at Harrenhal in 281 AC. It would be here that the actions of Rhaegar Targaryen would cause Robert's rebellion, leading to the Targaryens' removal of power. Lady Shella Whent is the last living member by the start of Game of Thrones, but she's chased out of Harrenhal by Tywin Lannister. It's believed this old lady has since died, but it isn't really confirmed yet. But either way, House Whent was out by 300 AC. Cersei would then give this castle to the piece of shit of a character, Janos Slynt, but Tyrion would quickly send him to the wall, ending House Slynt before it even really started. The 9th and current family who hold Harrenhal is House Baelish. After brokering the Tyrell and Lannister alliance, Joffrey awards Littlefinger this castle, and even names him Lord Paramount of the Trident, which means he rules over the entire kingdom of the Riverlands. But Peter has never set foot in this cursed castle. He was smart enough to realize that Harrenhal has withered every hand to touch it. He's far more interested in the Vale and the Iron Throne. When talking about this place, he says, "Ah, and what a castle it is, cavernous halls and ruined towers, ghosts and draughts, ruinous to heat, impossible to garrison, and there's that small matter of a curse." The towers that are in ruin all have some pretty dark and depressing names. Whatever names Harren the Black had meant to give his towers were long forgotten. They were called the Tower of Dread, the Widow's Tower, the Wailing Tower, the Tower of Ghosts, and Kingspire Tower. Different rulers have picked and chose which towers to make theirs, because it's not like anyone can utilize this place in its entirety. But whatever location they pick isn't going to be very comfortable. Harrenhal sucks, and it's creepy, and ugly, and falling apart. I'm pretty sure by the end of the book story, another family will take over since Littlefinger is keeping his distance. Hope you all enjoyed this spooky video that I should have made a month ago. I promise my next video won't be as bleak. Thanks for watching, guys.